Aloha, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Emily Calabrero. I'm the Vice President of Resource Development at Aloha United Way, and I will serve as your moderator today. We first want to start by saying mahalo to Hawaii Foundation, to Bank of Hawaii Foundation, to our local media partners, and all those who support our ALICE initiative and the ALICE work, including our ALICE cohort. This report, ALICE in Hawaii, 2024 Facts and Figures, is the second report of its kind, meant to capture the state of ALICE households in Hawaii and really focus on the unique features of our community and its needs. This presentation will be recorded and we'll have time for questions after. Both the ALICE report and recording will be available on our website at auw.org following this meeting. To set the stage, we want to define ALICE, which is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. This refers to those who make just enough money to not receive government assistance, but not quite enough to cover the bare necessities. In essence, living paycheck to paycheck. This is part of a larger network known as United for ALICE, which comes from United Way of Northern New Jersey. For our purposes today, we'll be referring to those who are ALICE and those who are below the federal poverty line. Collectively, this is known as who are ALICE and below. I'd like to now introduce our panelists that'll share a little bit more about the information and how it affects our current state. Starting with Peter Ho, Chairman and CEO of Bank of Hawaii, followed by Suzanne Skoge, Chief Operating Officer at Aloha United Way, then Micah Kane, President and CEO of Hawaii Community Foundation, and Kayla Ke'ehu Alexander, Vice President of Community Impact with Aloha United Way. Thank you all for being here today. Peter, I'm going to start with you and ask for you to share a little bit about the overview and importance of understanding our local ALICE households and why this research is so crucial to us.
Emily, thank you. And Aloha, everyone, thank you for being here today. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. Mayor, thank you for being here. John, congratulations on retiring a second time from AUW tomorrow. And I know we have representatives from the state, and Carl's here from UHERO as well, members of the press. This is important knowledge for all of us. Our journey at Bank of Hawaii, and I just want to say from the very beginning that Bank of Hawaii is a funder and sponsor of this project, but we're not the only business in town that supports this project. So we're just one of the ones that helped get it started, I guess. But Micah came to us, I want to say 5+ years ago, with this idea that there is an analysis that can be done that gets beyond the federal poverty line. And I think we all understood in this town federal poverty to be around 12, 13%, and that's a terrible number. But the reality is, through the methodology of ALICE, what came to the fore was a reality that greater than 40%, more than 4 in 10 people in our community were just barely making ends meet or not able to make ends meet. And I don't know about all of you, but certainly all of us at Bank of Hawaii felt a tremendous sense of gloom around that reality. And the idea was then, therefore, to bring this knowledge forward to our community, which HCF and AUW and the infrastructure that is the ALICE methodology helped us to do, and then to perpetuate that moving forward. And I'm very proud to be we're very proud to be a very small part of this effort. It's not been a one and done. It's been something that's happened year after year. I really tip my hat to AUW for really taking the torch here and pushing this effort forward. And it's one of those things where the content is not good stuff. I mean, there's no good news in any of the information, but the process and the importance of our understanding this knowledge is so critical. And so I'm just very proud of the effort here. I look into the room, I see so many people that are intimately knowledgeable around this topic and are trying to get things done on a daily basis. And I feel, frankly, very small as a component of that, but hopeful. And I think over the past 5 years, we've worked very hard. AUW and HCS worked very hard to get the knowledge out there. And I think we're transitioning to try to get something done. And I know at the city level here in Honolulu, at the state level, there are a lot of efforts to get things done. But this is absolutely critical because affordability and just economic well-being in our state is not where we need it to be. So back to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you again for the tremendous support of Bank of Hawaii through our work. Before we dive into the data, Suzanne, can you share with us a little bit about this household survival budget, which is really the basis of our ALICE work?
Sure. Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. The household survival budget is basically the standard that ALICE Works use to determine a minimum cost of household necessities. It includes minimum for housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, taxes, and technology like smartphones that we consider a necessity today. What that translates to is about $39,000 a year for a single person and $107,000 for a family of four, $99,000 after tax credits. Most of our, as I said, the federal poverty line comes out to about $17,000 or $35,000 for a family of four. So that is the gap that we're talking about when we talk about families. And the survival budget, which you can see up on the screen, shows you how that minimum breakdown is leaving a lot of families in trouble right now. We also know that the folks that are falling below and unable to meet the survival budget is not distributed evenly around our community. We know that ALICE households are much more likely to have children. In our survey, 50% of families that have children are living as ALICE. They're more likely to be female. 48% of females are living under the ALICE threshold compared to 33% of men. They're more likely to be Native Hawaiian, with 58% of all of our Native Hawaiian families in the state living under the ALICE threshold, and 52% of our Filipino families living under the ALICE threshold. Some other significant trends around who is ALICE is we see that most of our ALICE families are younger. A full 53% of the families or households that have folks under 35 years old are now ALICE. This is our workforce and a flag that we really want to raise around the importance of helping our younger families survive here. And last, you're more likely to be ALICE if you live on neighbor islands. Maui, Kauai, and Hawaii Island all have higher numbers of ALICE families than Oahu. When we talk about who is ALICE, there's over 500,000 folks that we're calling ALICE, but we want to just very briefly say one just quick story. We have a family that we were talking to that is a single mom who came to one of our ALICE grantees for help, and she couldn't save enough for a housing deposit and was living with her 2 children in their car despite working full-time. She had to choose between repairing the car that was their home and only means of transportation, between saving that money for a deposit that could mean long-term stability for her family. Thankfully, we were able to connect her to a local housing program where she was helped to save that deposit. But those are the families that we are looking at, those types of decisions to survive here, to take care of their children, and to find housing and financial stability in Hawaii.
Thanks, Suzanne. In this new report, what is the difference in the number of ALICE households? What did we find?
Thanks, Emily. The findings were really interesting this year. In 2022, we had found that 44% of households in Hawaii were under the ALICE threshold. And we have adjusted that with some current weightings, which I'll explain in a moment, to 43% based on age, gender, and county. In 2024, that number has dropped slightly to 40%. 2 in 5 households are still under ALICE, though we did see a small decline. Within that number, there's a small drop in poverty from 14% in 2022 to 12% in 2024. So there is a little bit of good news, Peter. We believe a few of the reasons for this are government interventions from COVID obviously helped families who were struggling to get back out of poverty. Families have been able to go back to work after the pandemic and earn a little more money to bring themselves back out of poverty. In some cases, there were increases in wage to our lower wage jobs because of minimum wage rules. However, before we get too excited about the drop in poverty, we want to note that another reason that the ALICE number is dropping is we could be capturing a change in demographics in our state. Another reason the ALICE number could drop is that our ALICE families are simply leaving Hawaii. We hope that this work will warrant further research in the future to look at this and hopefully reverse this trend. A very quick note on the weighting that I mentioned. As we looked at the 2024 data and we found those differences with age and gender, we did do some slight changes to the weighting. All the data that you see in the reports in front of you have been reweighted so that 2022 and 2024 are comparable.
What are some of the critical challenges facing Alice households today?
To my mind, there's really one. It's that Alice families are facing a really difficult decision about whether or not they should leave Hawaii. We found that 37% of families surveyed this year said that somebody in their family is considering leaving the state. And when we asked them why, there were two very clear key drivers. 85% of families said it was simply the high cost of living in Hawaii. And 73%, 3 out of 4 families who said they're considering leaving, specifically said it was because of the high cost of housing. There's other reasons that are impacting families, as you can see on the screen, but these two are driving our outmigration for families who are considering leaving. And if that 1 in 3 doesn't sound too terrifying, that means it's 180,000 people right now are considering leaving the state of Hawaii, from our workforce, from our younger families, our Hawaiian families. And that is something that we are deeply concerned about at Aloha United Way and, of course, Bank of Hawai and Hawaii Community Foundation. As you can see from the next slide, we're really seeing that families are barely getting by. 48% of all households are saying that. It's not getting by, almost getting by, really finding it hard to get by. And 1 in 4 have said that their income was less than what they spent last year, which is, of course, simply not sustainable. We also looked for the first time at some of the causes of, the impacts of inflation that our state and the nation has seen over the last 2 years. And we see that Alice has been most hard hit by inflation, which you would expect. 62% of all the households that we surveyed said that inflation has been very stressful or somewhat stressful. And Alice households were twice as likely to say that inflation was very stressful for their family. A full 73% of the families we surveyed said that they were forced to make changes to their spending due to the rising cost of inflation. In addition, we also found that many of the families were deeply worried about their housing security. 40% of Alice families said that they were worried that they would be forced to move from their home in the next year. And 27% of residents, 1 in 4, said that they were worried about having to move next year, regardless of whether they're in a high-income group, middle-income group, or low-income group. 1 in 4 are also struggling to pay their housing costs, which is up from 18% in 2022. Last, we looked at food insecurity, which we've all, I think, anecdotally seen as a growing problem in our state. And we found that 46% of families below the Alice threshold are struggling to afford consistent access to food. I noted earlier that 73% of families are saying that they've had to make changes since inflation has been increasing. And almost half of our families at any income are saying that they have cut back on fresh food in the last 2 years. So what this report shows, I think any way that you cut it, Emily, is 40% of folks, 2 out of 5 families, over 500,000 people in Hawaii are struggling just to get by. And as we continue to see these type of trends, we are worried about losing our workforce, seeing our local families struggle, and potentially leave Hawaii. And if we do not do something about long-term affordable housing and the cost of living, we will continue to see these trends grow as we do the future Alice reports.
At the core of Alice work is a realization that Alice households are just one unexpected disaster away from financial crisis. We saw this during the pandemic and most certainly with the Maui wildfires. Micah, Hawaii Community Foundation has been supporting disaster relief and recovery on Maui, working alongside other organizations and nonprofits. How is Alice impacted on Maui, and what do you see as a call to action for Maui and our state?
Yeah, maybe I want to comment first before I get to that question, is just build upon what Peter was talking about earlier. Alice is a metric that United Ways around the country use. Hawaii's not unique to that issue. What's unique about Hawaii is that we've coalesced around a single data point to help us communicate the well-being of people in place in Hawaii. And if not for the non-traditional stakeholder, like the leader of a bank or the leader of a county or the leader of an insurance company that's going to step up and speak from their platform, about that, we would not be here today having this conversation. Hawaii is unique because we've all coalesced around that acronym: asset limited, income constrained, and employed. If you're to ask any one of us about Alice 8 years ago, we'd say, that's my auntie, right? But today it means something very, very important to us. If not for Alice, we would not have passed legislation back in 2020 to create universal preschools that was led by Sylvia Luke. That would not have happened. That's one of the top 4, right, that sits there on Alice that drives down the cost of living in Hawaii. That's a mandate by the year 2030. Would not happen if not for the voices of people like Peter and the mayor and others and Carl reaffirming the importance of coming around common data to create shared goals, to create collective action. And so I think this is just one more step in this effort to try and do that. So I really want to commend John, you and your team, along with Michelle and your team, to keep at it. You know, I know you've been yelling from the balcony for decades, right, as an organization, but we're there right now. We're starting to see progress. When we, at least for Michelle and I, in leading Hawaii Community Foundation, we've been looking at Alice pretty intently from about 2018. And it shouldn't surprise anybody about what's happening on Maui as a result of the disaster and the amount of fragility that was in there prior to the fires. Prior to the fires, Maui County in 2018, 61% of the families were cost burdened by housing. That means that they're paying 30% or more of their income, in some cases more than 50% of their total income, just to have a roof over their head. The math doesn't work after that. And so the first thing that Maui was in front of the curve on all things bad, right? So the balance of the state should not have to look far to realize that unless we disrupt this system in a massive way, our future is very predictable. You know, we'll continue to see the outmigration of the people we care the most about. We got to settle this housing issue in a massive, massive way. And this report reaffirms that. So when you look at this first slide, if you go back to that previous slide, you can see that the fragility of Maui sits right there, right? The numbers there, 53% of the families are struggling right now, compared to 41% statewide. It's not a rocket scientist. Carl can tell you I could have did that blindfolded, right, Carl? But what action do we have to take is critical to changing this number. And one of the things that we have to do as a community is we got to be more definitive about what the trade-offs are in order to change this trajectory. What level of investment is it going to have to take in order for us to truly build affordability in Hawaii? Maui is a microcosm that I think we can get our head around. And with the amount of investment and attention that is happening in that county, it's a fixable problem. I mean, you can walk outside this store and talk to any developer and tell you building a house is easy. Building a subdivision is easy. We just make it really, really complicated. And we gotta acknowledge that it's very expensive, period. We have a competitive disadvantage on labor, land, and material. And so our investment in that space in order to create an arena where people can thrive is going to be much more here than in any place around the country. And we need to accept that. That's one piece. The second piece is the people we're trying to serve need to be part of the equation. A family that's doing well and having very bad spending practices, and a family that's doing well and doesn't have the discipline to manage their finances is a part of that problem. And we need to be good on the whole thing in order for us to get out of this rut. So when you look at the next slide and you look at some of the personal implications as a result of the fire, it shouldn't surprise anybody that mental health is one of the biggest challenges there. And we're seeing that at the Hawaii Community Foundation. And it's probably our second biggest spend as it relates to the Maui Strong Fund. And this has been reaffirmed by a lot of the data that we've been working with Carl and Yuhiro on in terms of trying to get not just case management, but case management that's like a blanket around a person that really is dealing with the unique circumstances that each and every family is facing on Maui. And that's one of the reasons we're finding why mental health is such an issue is because of the issues down below that. They don't know where their income's going to come from. They don't know where their shelter long-term is going to come from. You know, they've lost family members, or they know people who have lost family members. And so, to change that trajectory is going to be a challenge, but it definitely is doable. One last word around just collective impact. I was asked to just mention it. I mentioned it a little bit in the front of my comments. Alice is just one example of when you can coalesce around a common data set, an imperfect common data set, but as perfect as we can get, a consistent data set, and we can create shared goals. And when we create shared goals, there's a good shot we can create collective action. Create collective action, we can actually move the dial a little bit. So again, unless leaders like the mayor, he's been a major champion of Alice. I want to thank you for that, Mayor, being willing to use your bully pulpit to really acknowledge that work, and the banks as well, Jim, you and Peter, and all that your folks are doing. We got to stick with it. So appreciate that, and I'll pass the mic on to the next person.
Thank you so much, Micah. Kayla, this next question is for you. Outside of publishing this report, what does Aloha United Way use the data for?
Thank you. So this report is critical for Aloha United Way and the nonprofit sector at large to identify the changes in our community, assess these trends, both around hardships and barriers, and then use these insights to drive meaningful change. The partnership between Aloha United Way and the Hawaii Community Foundation is one of the biggest ways we do that. This has been key to building a foundation of service providers, advocates, funders, and stakeholders who are all committed to addressing these challenges collectively, so that we're not just looking for solutions to problems, we're transforming our systems so that these problems no longer exist. That only happens when we have collaboration, when we have common vision, and when we can put our trust into the community partners that are doing the work on the ground. Back in 2022, this very partnership launched an ALICE cohort of 17 local nonprofit providers. Since then, we have rallied the nonprofit sector to address the biggest service gaps in our community, which are around those who are ALICE and below. We have established a network of providers and advocates who have scaled their financial training programs by 123%, who have increased their collaborations, securing that network by 233%, and who have served over 20,000 local ALICE households. Now in 2025, the ALICE cohort has evolved into an expanded network of 20 grant partners who are driving collective change for ALICE by working to enhance financial stability, increase access to safe and affordable housing, create pathways to earning above ALICE wages through workforce opportunities, and by championing policies that actually serve Hawaii's working families. This data guides all of that work. It informs what specific interventions are going to be needed, and it sparks innovation in the nonprofit sector so that we can continuously work to ensure that solutions aren't coming from top down, they're coming from community, they're coming from ALICE.
And what are some of the challenges that you've seen or faced serving the ALICE household community?
So we are seeing challenges at every level in serving ALICE, things from debt to mental health issues to just the ability to access food and childcare. Despite the nonprofit sector scaling direct services, we as a community just need to do more. Because just like with homelessness or food insecurity, we're not going to service our way out of ALICE. All the philanthropy in the world is not going to end the problems that our current systems are continuously perpetuating. ALICE is found in every single corner of our community and our economy. No single entity is going to solve for all of this. It will require commitments from every single sector to that change. If 40% of our community is struggling, that's not an individual problem. That is an all of us problem, and it will require all of us to change this. This data supports what so many of us have been feeling and saying, which is that it's getting too hard to survive here. We are barreling towards a future where Hawaii's economy will no longer be economically viable if the people that work here cannot afford to live here. So our goal, along with the ALICE cohort, is to create a community that is not just survivable, it is thrivable. So we are looking to create a future where single mothers do not have to sacrifice income when they need to stay home with a sick child, or where our educators do not have to juggle multiple jobs just to be able to afford to live in the same neighborhood where they teach, or where one missed paycheck doesn't result in spiraling hardships and eventually homelessness. So we are working to create a future where everyone in Hawaii has what they need to be able to live here, to survive, to live, and to thrive.
Thank you so much, Kayla. This last question is for actually all of you. Given everything that you've shared today, what is the most urgent call to action that you see to really help our Alice households thrive? We'll start with you, Peter.
Well, I think it was just illuminated, and that is that it's very easy for the 60% of the community that is not Alice or below to say that's their problem. The reality is it's our problem. From a community moral standpoint, it is our problem. But I will also tell you from an economic standpoint, it is everyone's problem, because we cannot continue to bleed into this situation without medium long term having real implications to our overall economy. And I just hope that the fortunate 60% begin to realize that this isn't them, this is us, because that is a reality. Whether we choose to, whichever way you drop on the moral bound, it's an economic reality.
So true. Thank you. Suzanne, how about for you?
Definitely agree with Peter. This is an economic issue that's affecting our entire community. Well, thank you. Will continue to affect our community if we don't act quickly. To me, this data clearly says to our policymakers, there's two main reasons why people are leaving Hawaii, and it's cost of living and it's housing. We know some solutions to cost of living. It includes tax credit packages, strong childcare, as Micah referenced, good workforce opportunity, and it also includes access to safe and stable housing. When we think most people are thinking they are not going to have the house they live in a year, we know that we have something urgent that we need to act on. We have policy tools, we have ability to build more housing, we have ability to direct the housing that exists to residents. And I think until we start looking at housing as something that needs to be built for the people who live here to allow our community and our economy to thrive and have the workforce, the families that we want to see, we are not going to solve the problems of Alice. So I think those two, cost of living and housing, are absolutely critical.
Thank you. Micah?
I think just reiterating it in a different way in what Peter and Susan have just said. I mean, I think what concerns me the most right now is the people that are leaving Hawaii are the people that can afford to leave. They're our workforce. They're the people, they're our engine. And if this continues, we're going to have this hollow community where our engine is just not there, right? And you're going to have very, very poor people, and we're going to have very, very wealthy people. And that's a major concern. I think what exacerbates that right now is this gets camouflaged in a lot of the way in which we're going about our business as stakeholders between employee and employers. I mean, this trend that we're seeing between employers and employees to quickly strike and not have a unified voice to address this issue of cost of living is, I think, a very dangerous space that we're in right now. Employers will never be able to elevate wages to meet the cost of living requirements of this place. And the business model will never support that. And it's unfortunate that we've created an environment where these two very influential voices are apart and not coalesced, pointing at new policies to make it better for both parties. And I feel like we need to reset that table so that those issues can be addressed as a universal community. And that concerns me a lot, because both parties are very well intended, but it's impossible for them to reach their mutual goals in the current landscape that they're playing in. And unless we come up with a host of very disruptive policies that drive down the cost of living, these people that are striking are going to leave, right? And again, they're our engine. So, but at the same time, this is a very, very solvable problem. Again, it's not difficult to build housing. It's expensive, but it's not difficult.
Thank you, Micah. Kayla?
Yeah, I completely agree. And when it comes to Alice, if we don't step up, Alice will step out. Tomorrow's workforce is already looking up one-way tickets out of here. So there needs to be urgent action, yes, around policy, but also around programs, because people are struggling today. Both government and non-government programs, things like emergency financial assistance, housing assistance, access to food and healthcare, access to truly affordable homes. While there are some government supports, a lot of this work is being upheld by the nonprofit sector, and that includes the Alice cohort. We will not get the community we want just by talking about it. We need to actually build it. So we are calling on the private and public sectors to join us in this work. We need to create the future we want to see so that we do not just end up with a future that just happens by default.
Thank you to all of our panelists this morning for sharing the data, for your mana'o. We're very grateful. You know, there's no doubt that the rising cost of living, the instability, you know, of housing really highlights the immediate need for change and support of the ALICE work. To Micah's point, this is solvable, but it's going to take everyone. We really want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you want to learn more or get involved, please connect with Aloha United Way. Visit our website at auw.org. We want to say once more thank you so much to Bank of Hawaii, to Hawaii Community Foundation, all of our ALICE sponsors, the ALICE cohort. With them, none of this would be possible. We have some tremendous support in the community. Like I mentioned before, Hawaii Community Foundation, Bank of Hawaii, HMSA, HEI, Hawaii Pacific Health, as well as Locations Foundation and Women United that have been serving and supporting the cohort of work that you've seen here this morning for the past 6 years. So thank you again, everyone. We'd like to now open it up to questions, questions from the audience. Mayor.
I don't want to be disingenuous here because what they said was you get up and say a few words when we ask for questions. So just so you know, I don't readily jump up and grab a microphone. I'm a little, you know. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge you because you, Micah, thank you for that, for your words. But honestly, you all framed the possibilities and the challenge as well as could be. I mean, and it is about that, though. This is information. So you asked me how important I think this is. I brought 6 of our top guys from the city here to watch this presentation, as opposed to going back and giving them a PowerPoint, because we eternalize this. This information for us has been an absolute roadmap in all the things that we've tried to do since coming to office, because in governing, change is the hardest thing to get done. And none of us are interested in perpetuating the status quo. I came from a business that I spent more than 4 decades in that was driven by people, technology, and audience research. And the first time I think I saw Peter present the ALICE report, I just took that kind of audience research I was used to a whole different level. And now becoming mayor, this kind of information is very empowering for us. I want to say a couple of things about that on the outmigration or even the improvement, because I do think it's because people left. I want to be really clear. We did a kickoff of Honolulu City Lights where Kawaiau Church and Kahu Ken got up there to talk. So he just got back from Vegas, and they're touting the fact that 40,000 people from Hawaii moved there this past year. Okay? And we do housing research that indicates actually a demand for housing is at a higher AMI than was lower. And the reason for that is that people moving in here with more income, but it's really messing up. It's right before our eyes it's happening. It's really messing up that tax base, our engine. And it's because the math doesn't work and people are giving up. And so information like this for us, because that's how I look at it, the net numbers on the outmigration, that's a term that we talked about a lot. And I forget how recently it came into vogue, but it's been something we talk a lot about. And it's real, and it's terrifying in so many ways. So, take nothing away from that, but it's more dire than that. And they do leave because they have the means, but they also leave giving up. You know, they don't want to be up there. And people tell you that all the time. And I walked into a studio last year in LA. The first 3 guys I met were from Hawaii. They say, "Bro, we're up here, but we'd rather be home. Make this happen back home. We'd rather be there." And that's what the Kahu talked about. He said everybody he met with, they all said, we would rather be in Hawaii. You know, and so that's a real responsibility for those of us now entrusted with the power and the responsibility. For us, this and the battles we face. I heard you say it's easy. Let me tell you, it may be easier to go out there and pour a foundation, but to do the other stuff, okay, and that's what we're determined to get done. So I'm excited about our team, what we've committed to. We said before we leave in the next 4 years, and we're on track to do so, that we'll develop 18,000 accretive housing units to what was there at the existing base. The city was not a player before. I'm not here to disparage anybody. We've had to create that. I'm excited about the road ahead. This is very empowering. So I want to thank you and everybody else that was involved in providing this. And also, beyond just the report, it's creating the awareness. Because as you said, Peter, it's all of us. It's all of us. And people have got to internalize that. And that is the spirit of living here. And so this is a reality check. And as I started to say earlier, in my former life, the better you understood that audience research, how you could work with that, made all the difference in the quality of your news operation, how you succeeded as an entity. Well, it's the same format here. The better we understand the problem, okay, the easier it's going to be to build the right solutions and then to execute. So I thank you. I'm part of my team here today. I'm part of it. As we start our second term, our commitment to help alleviating the conditions that led to this report is our creed. I can promise you that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Ms. D.
Is this on? Okay. First of all, thank you guys all for all the hard work, putting the report together, the data, the analysis. It is crucial. For myself, as the board chair of Women United, it has really helped us to drive what programs we are going to support financially. They're going to have the biggest impact in fulfilling our mission, which a big part of that is the Alice population, female-led households. So thank you guys so much for all of your work and continued work, and know that it is utilized in so many different ways and really helps us to drive that needle. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
I can feel it. Kind of going back to sort of more in the beginning of the presentation, I noticed that food costs were the highest cost for families, even more than housing. Has it always been that way, or what has kind of driven that change? Is it something that's different over time?
Who would like to take that?
I have two teenagers at home, so I can speak a little to this. The 1757 divided by 4 divided by 30 is about $15 per meal per family member. And the reality, that sounds like a lot. Reality is go to Zippy's or L&L or whatever plate lunch place you want to. That's about how much it costs to eat a meal. So I was trying to figure out like how much fluff, if any, there is in these numbers. My conclusion is there's hardly any at all. So I think this budget is probably more bare bones than it is opulent for sure.
I was kind of asking more so like, is it because of like inflation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I don't think that 5 years ago a plate lunch cost $15. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, right here.
So it seems like this housing issue has always been a problem, and it's more of a problem now. It seems like Hawaii is trying its best to, build as much affordable housing as possible. But even with affordable housing, the median, income is still relatively higher because of the wealth gap sometimes. So it might not seem very affordable to those who can't afford it. Besides affordable housing, are you guys working on any other things to combat this issue in terms of housing specifically?
Peter?
Well, you touch on a really important concept. And I know Carl's team has done some work on this because if you go to the UHERO website, he has the Housing Affordability Index. And if you look at the data for a single family home from 2000 to today, the affordability index is like half of what it was in 2000. It's like a little bit better than half of what it was for a condominium in 2000. So incomes have not kept up with the cost of housing, in other words, right? And so absolutely everything that we've talked about today has been around the budget, the expenditure side. But the reality is the revenue side also has to come along. The income side has to be in line as well. There's no question about that. And unfortunately, the numbers around that are not terribly positive either. So, for instance, 2019, I believe, was the peak employment in the state of Hawaii. So, in other words, we've kind of wound backwards for 5-6 years now. Part of that is the population. The population, as we discussed, has been winding backwards for several years now. And, the major drivers of our economy are a little bit of neutral. So the visitor industry, our number one industry, which is terribly important and will be important to us for many years. The reality from a real dollar spend standpoint is we peaked in that industry in 1989 and have been struggling to figure out how to drive more real revenue out of that industry ever since. So there are a lot of challenges on the expense side, but that's not to say that there aren't challenges on the revenue side as well, the income side.
I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. So another.
Maybe Carl, you want to?
Oh,
Can I jump in on that? Because I was I think some of the last slides, some of those areas of focus in the Alice cohort is workforce development, right? And everyone in this room who employs workers doesn't have enough workers, right? There was a news story the other day about DOH is only 70%, is missing 30% of the workers they need. And you get that at the city, you get that at any institution. So the more that we can do to move some of these Alice single moms, dual income families into those jobs that are higher paying, we prepare them for them, we provide them with the training, that will help with what Pete was just talking about, right? The high cost of housing is not new, it's worse. But what's really changed over the last 20 years is our incomes aren't going up. But there are jobs out there that pay more than what these people are working in right now. The question is, what can we do to move them into higher education, higher skill, higher paying jobs? Because the jobs are there.
I think the other thing, was like that the housing costs, like you mentioned, it's not new. And comparing like to the mainland, I guess rent prices are relatively similar, but it's kind of the wage, right? Like I think our minimum wage is way lower than a lot of the other bigger cities and bigger states. So is that a problem for like the wage and rent?
Well, I'm not willing to accept us being compared to a poorly performing urban community. We should set our own bar. Again, building affordability is very possible. To the mayor's point, my point is the mechanics of building is not difficult. We just got to get them there, right? The carrying costs and the amount of expenses that we pass on to the private sector that then gets passed on to the homeowner is what creates this exacerbation that is very solvable. It's in our complete control, so the more buttons we can push to let them go is where we need to be measuring our performance. I think to try to compare ourselves against another poorly performing market is the wrong way to go. That's just justifying our poor performance. Let's solve the problem. And anytime we try to bring up a solution does not drive to the core of the problem, it shouldn't be talked about. We got to drive at the core of the problem. Land, money for infrastructure, offsite. Land costs $150,000 to $200,000 a lot, 5,000 square foot lot. Offsite infrastructure, $200,000 a lot. On-site infrastructure, $150,000 a lot. That's $550,000 before you even go vertical and before a developer takes its profit. So those issues right now, for the most part, are borne by the private sector, passed on by government, and double taxed to the homeowner, right? Where those costs should be borne back onto government where it was. If you go back to the early 70s, I think Kailua is a perfect example, and I've used this before. Just give me like 30 seconds. Kailua is a perfect example of what affordability looked like in the 70s. Kailua Park is a 50-acre park. 3 football fields, 3 baseball fields, a soccer field. Adjacent to Kailua Park is a major gymnasium. with an athletic facility and a major Olympic-sized pool. 20 tennis courts, 5 basketball courts. On the corner of that park, fire station. Next to the fire station, a police station. Next to the police station, a library. Next to the library, an elementary school. Light commercial along the backside, an intermediate school on the far side. Aikahi wastewater treatment plant, major wastewater treatment plant, built way on the front end of all that development to take on all of the infrastructure, wastewater improvement for that area. Coming down Pali Highway, going down into Kailua, you look up on the mountain, you see a massive water tank. That water tank was built to service that entire development. What we do now is we piecemeal this stuff. And so you get the park you can afford, you get the road you can afford, you can get the road that you get all the things that only that little piecemeal development can afford, and you don't get the scale. And on top of that, it gets passed on to the homeowner. Whereas we got to have the forward thinking, as the mayor is been advocating for, to build this infrastructure up front, roads, water, sewer, public facilities. And it becomes almost like a fee simple DHHL-like project. That's why DHHL can be affordable. No land costs, no infrastructure costs, right? And they move quickly, right? Because they have the ability to do so. That is a very viable system for us.
Thank you so much, Micah. We have concluded our time for Q&A. Again, we want to say a tremendous thank you to all of our panelists, Peter, Suzanne, Micah, and Kayla. For everyone here today, mahalo for joining us. We do have press kits. They're located right here. There'll be an AUW representative there to share that with you. It has a report as well as some other collateral for you to use. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Aloha.